So one of the things that constantly comes up, and I get this kind of, I would say directly and indirectly. It's not always like a question that's posed to me, but it's something that I can tell is on somebody's mind, which is how do I find the time to do this? Because the reality of building a product is that it's just stressful. It's time consuming. It just takes a lot of energy. It's not always an easy thing. Now, there are, I guess you could call them hacks or tricks and techniques that you can use to kind of reduce the amount of time, but no matter what, taking an idea from your head up here and putting it, kind of out into the world takes just a ton of time and energy. And this is where I would say the majority of people either quit before they start, so they don't even make the attempt, or they just kind of give up along the way. So they realize like, oh my God, this is so time consuming, or this is so tiring, and this takes so much energy, that they just say like, you know what? Not worth it. Not something that I'm going to bother doing. And I think from what I've observed when I'm mentoring folks or just talking to people in general, one of the things that I've observed is that the problem of not having enough time can actually be resolved. It just comes down to consciously thinking about like, well, what am I trying to achieve long term? And then making an actual plan about how you're going to achieve that. And that sounds like a really simplified thing. And it is, to be fair. It's not that black and white, but it does start out that way. So you have to start from this position of simplicity and say, okay, well, what is it that I'm trying to accomplish here? And for most people, I would say the reality is you're in the situation where maybe you're working a job, or you're doing something like freelance or contract work or something like that. But you're not responsible for your own revenue, meaning like the thing that you do every day to make money is not coming from something that you created. So it's not coming from a product or maybe a service that you directly offer. It's doing work for other people. And so you're in this situation where, okay, I want to make enough money to not have to do that. So I don't want to work for somebody else. I want to work for myself. I want to earn my own living, and I want to earn it on my own terms. And I think if you're going to actually accomplish that, if you actually believe that that's something that you really actually want to do, you have to kind of lower your expectations. And I say that from experience, not to like shake a finger at you, but to really say that from experience, because, several years ago when I started down this path, so my original goal was what I exactly just described. So I was doing freelance work primarily. So I was doing front-end development and, believe it or not, WordPress development. I was barely working with things like JavaScript, and that's how I made my living. But it was frustrating because I was constantly in this loop of, okay, I have to go find new clients, and then I have to keep those clients around, and then I have to keep them happy by doing a good job. And that process and repeating that over and over, and I would say I did that straight for, it had to be 2 to 3 years. Like that's just how I made my living. So I didn't really have a job. I just did freelance tasks and kind of scraped work up where I could find it. That process was just incredibly tiring and frustrating. And so my thought was, well, how do I get out of that? And at the time I was just starting to develop a little bit of a reading habit, and I was reading the book, what was it called? It's Seeking Wisdom by Peter Bevelin. And in that book, it's just a collection of bits of wisdom formed around different talks and interviews with Charlie Munger and Warren Buffett. So Warren Buffett, you're probably a little more familiar with. He's the famous investor who made like $50-60 billion, something crazy like that, and then gave a bunch of it away. Charlie Munger is his partner. So they run together Berkshire Hathaway, which is an investment firm and a hedge fund. So they basically go out and buy businesses and invest their money in those businesses and build up lots and lots of capital to do stuff. And doing that is not easy. And this book kind of talked about some of their methods for kind of figuring out how to do that. And one of the things that I distinctly remember from that book that I learned was you have to lower your expectations. You have to be in this position where you can't just expect what you want to be handed to you. You can't just say like, oh, well, I want to do this, and come on, everybody, fall in line. Like, you have to do what I want. You have to give me what I want. You can't do that. And so I think in terms of finding time to work on your ideas, the first thing that's most important is lowering your expectations. So put yourself in a position where you're not expecting things to go quickly. You're not expecting things to just happen for you. You're going to have to make some level of sacrifice. And that really helps kind of set, I don't know, the word that came to mind was horizon, but it sets the goal that you're trying to hit a little further down the road, and it makes you realize, like, okay, well, I'm not owed this thing. I don't, have to do this thing. I'm choosing to do it. And because I'm choosing to do it, I also have to choose to make the time to do it. And I think that's kind of the next thing to focus on. So once you've lowered your expectations, I mean, really, like, you actually have to spend time and say, like, okay, let's be honest, like, how quickly do I expect to do this, or, how much effort do I expect to put into this? Once you've kind of calmed that down a little bit and you said, like, okay, realistically, this is probably going to take a while. This is probably going to take not just a few months. This is probably going to take a few years. And realistically, that's true. There's a lot of stuff involved in shipping a product. You have to do the development of the product. You have to market the product. You have to maintain the product and make sure it works. You have to scale the product up in the form of like content marketing and going out and finding customers and doing all this stuff. And it just takes time, especially if you're kind of the independent, resourceful solopreneur. Like, you have to just kind of accept that, like, okay, this is going to take time. So the first thing you can do to find some time to reduce the amount of time that it actually takes, so you can actually put effort into it, is audit your current schedule. And this is kind of like the age-old advice, so there's not really much to say here, but it's kind of like, look at your day, right? Look at, and maybe not just your day, but your entire week, and kind of consider, like, okay, where am I putting my time? Am I actually, making time to work on this thing? Or am I like spending 8 hours watching TV and Netflix and all that stuff? Maybe you're participating in too many activities. So if you like to kind of be like the extrovert type and you like to go out and, like, maybe you have like a sports league that you participate in, or multiple sports leagues, or like classes or something like that. Maybe you've got too much of that stuff going on. Maybe it's a family commitment that you have. And I would say, I just want to kind of make this point very clear. I'm never saying that you should kind of take time away from your family with any of this stuff. And we're going to talk about something that I've seen other people do that I think is actually a great way to solve that problem. But we'll talk about that in a bit. But the point is, like, look at your current schedule and try and find the things that might be negotiable in terms of, do I actually have to do this, or am I choosing to do this? And really actually take the time, like, sit with a piece of paper and say, like, okay, what's all the stuff that I have a regular commitment to? And again, some stuff is going to be non-negotiable, like family time or work or something like that. But really take the time and just, like, put out a list. And then from that list, really think and say, like, do I really need to watch TV all the time? Do I really need to sit on the toilet and play with my phone for 2 hours? Do I need to do these things? And just bringing some level of self-awareness to that is going to make it a lot easier for you to identify pockets where you can basically say, like, oh, you know what? I don't need to play baseball every Saturday morning for 2 hours. I can put that time into my product. And again, it's not about getting full days necessarily. If you can, great. But realistically, like, if you're a normal person, you're going to have a bunch of stuff that you can't get out of. But there are some things that you can get out of. And so you need to figure out what those things are. One way to kind of move in that direction is to say, like, well, instead of trying to find random pockets of time throughout your week or throughout your day, what really works, and this is something that I do, I'm actually doing it right now as I'm recording this, which is to have dedicated days for dedicated things. So in this case, dedicated time to work on your product. And technically speaking, Clever Beagle, the business or the company, is my product. It's my service. It's the thing that I'm developing. And right now it's Sunday morning. I'm recording this. So you're listening to this on Monday, but Sunday mornings are my time for putting together content. So I write a blog post if it's necessary for that week, and then I sit here and I record this, and that's what I'm doing. I've made a dedicated space to say like, nope, this is the time that I do this. So if anything comes up where that is put under threat, I really take the time to consciously weight it and say like, is this necessary? So there's some things that you can't get out of, right? Like maybe somebody gets sick and you gotta like go to the doctors, go to the hospital, God forbid, all that stuff. But like they're outside of that stuff, you can create this boundary around the time, and that's what I've chosen to do. I've said, and I underscore that word, chosen. I've chosen to make this the time that I work on my content. And so what I know is by dedicating that time, I'm going to realistically and hopefully get something out the door in the form of content every single week. And now that I've done that, I've actually developed a habit around it. So I don't even consciously think, what am I doing on Sunday? It's just like, oh yeah, I'm gonna go to bed Saturday night and I'm gonna get up, I'll go get a cup of coffee, and then I kind of sit here, or in this case, stand here and do this. I record the content, I write the content, I get it out. And this is something you should consider. So there's definitely going to be some amount of time that you're not completely optimizing in your schedule. So what you want to look for is like maybe an early morning that you could wake up. So wake up ahead of time that you actually need to be up. So maybe if you got up at, I don't know, we'll say 5 a.m. every day, that would give you a gap of an extra 2 hours that you could spend working on your product. Maybe it's in the evening. So maybe there's a night where, I don't know, if you're in a relationship or you're married or something like that, maybe your spouse or your partner is kind of gone for 2 hours in the evening on Tuesdays, and so it's Tuesday night is your work night. But the point doesn't really matter when the time is or why it exists, but it's finding that time and making use of it and making it a deliberate thing that you do every single week and making it something that, again, is non-negotiable. So you want to tell people, whether it be family, friends, whoever, colleagues at work or a boss or something like that, like, no, this is my time for this. And if you're someone who works out, like you go to the gym, you exercise regularly, you want to apply the exact same mindset you've given to that to this. So if you say like, nope, like for me, Monday nights, Wednesday nights, and Saturday mornings, that's my workout time. Nothing else is going to fill that space. Very rarely do I take off time from those periods to say like, okay, I'm not going to do this. Very, very rare. And the reason why is that I know that if I show up on those days consistently, I'm going to develop a habit around working out, and then naturally I just become healthier as a result. And if you've seen videos of me in the past, before I did that, I was a bit of a chunker dunker. So it's like, clearly that plays out. It's not BS. It's an actual thing. So really try and identify those times and then be a little bit of a jerk about it. I don't want to say be mean to other people or be mean to your family or something like that, but just be kind of stern is probably a better word. So you want to say like, okay, this is my time for this thing. I need you to accept that and respect that and let me do what I'm doing. And then back it up with a why. So especially if you're you have a family, you at least have a spouse, or maybe you have kids, tell them why. So realistically, the reason you're doing this is not 100% selfish. It's not just for you. It's, well, you want to be in a position where you can provide a better family or a better life for your family, or maybe make more money to then give them a better life, as well as yourself. And so communicate those things back to people. Tell them and say like, no, this means something to me. Working on this thing means something to me, and I need time for it. So this is the time that I'm designating as my product time, or my time to work on this product. And that's it. And then you just kind of say to yourself, like, if I want to accomplish this, I have to make sure that I consistently show up. And again, once you get into the habit, and we're talking probably, I think there's an actual like psychological or scientific time period for this. It's like 6 to 8 weeks or something like that. If you consistently do it, then it kind of falls into what I talked about a little bit ago, which is it's just second nature. Like, you just do it. So definitely consider that. The other area where I think there's a lot of opportunity, there could be opportunity, but a lot of people don't look, is in your job. So if you're actively working a job, so you have a full-time job, or maybe you're a freelancer or a contractor, but you have dedicated clients that you have to give time to. One of the things that you can do is try and figure out, can I request fewer hours of work? So this is something that I personally did back around, I think it was 2014. I was still doing freelance and contract work, but I had a full-time contract. So I was working for a company as a contractor, but I was doing 5 days a week. I think it was like 9 to 5, 9 to 6, something like that. Like I had to be around, I had to be available. It was a remote gig, but I had to be present on we were using Slack at the time. So we had to be present on the Slack channel and available for questions and all that and kind of check in throughout the day. So I had this dedicated job that I had to be responsible for. And so at the time I was working on a site that some of you might know about, which is called the Meteor Chef. So I was writing tutorials on the Meteor JavaScript platform. And it was really time consuming and it was really hard because I was in the position where I was taking away time from the relationship I was in. At that point, I was taking time away from that. I was not really doing anything on the weekends but working on this because during the week, during my work day, I was stuck doing other stuff, so I didn't really have a choice. But I realized at one point, I was like, well, wait a minute. I don't necessarily need as much money as I'm making right now. I was making decent money. I was making like a ton of money because this was early in my career, so I wasn't like super great at what I was doing, but I was good enough where I was like, I was well paid. And I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I think I'm willing to take a little bit of a haircut in terms of the money that I'm making every month from this job. Why don't I ask and see if I can just work a shorter work period? So basically make the benefit back to the company that I was working for. So say like, I'll take some money kind of off the table, or I'll leave some money on the table, and you give me less hours working on it. And so I kind of built up the courage because at the time I was like a little nervous. I was still pretty early in my journey here, and I realized like, well, screw it. Let me just ask. It doesn't hurt. I'll see what happens. And sure enough, the person who was managing me at the time said like, yeah, I think we can do that. And like we basically made the deal, if memory serves right, that I would take off every Friday. So I wasn't available for work on their stuff. But what I did was I would say, okay, I'm off Fridays, but I might be on call a little bit of the time. So like if you send me a message and it's an emergency, I'll take care of it, but otherwise assume that I'm unavailable. And that worked out because what that allowed me to do was get an entire morning and afternoon, because I was still doing other client work, but it gave me an entire day that was under my control to go out and then do the things that I wanted to do. So I was able to dedicate it back to the Meteor Chef, and subsequently over time that ended up growing into something that was a lot more meaningful. And I think realistically it wouldn't have gotten to that point had I not done something like that. So that's definitely something to consider. Is maybe there's some little ding you can take against yourself right now in the short term to say, let me go ahead and afford myself the time to do this. So that's one thing. Now, similar to a job, one of the other places, and again, like I said earlier, this is non-negotiable, but kind of listen close to this idea because I've seen it work in bits and bobs, and I think it's something that more people should take advantage of, which is if you have a family, you're in a position where your time is hard committed. There's no way, like if you have kids, like unless you want to be like a crappy parent, like you got to pay attention to your kids. You got to spend time with your kids. You got to talk to them. You got to feed them. You got to bathe them, all that stuff. You can't just be like, you know what, Johnny, you got to go take care of yourself. You can't do that. Same thing with like a spouse or a partner. If you're in a relationship, you can't ignore that person. Otherwise that relationship's going to break down, and then you're in a whole bigger mess of trouble. And so realistically, family time is non-negotiable. You can't really escape that unless you want to kind of potentially hurt that thing. So if you don't want to do that, one thing that I think you could take advantage of, and this is specific to people who are parents. So if you have kids, but also if you have a partner, this would work too, which is to invite them in. So if you have kids, invite them to work with you, invite them to spend time with you while you do this. So make it a mom and dad and the kids thing. Make it, like mom and the kids, dad and the kids, or if like the whole family wants to join in, great. That would be awesome. But make it so that when you sit down, so we talked about having a specific night that you work on your product. Well, don't make that something where you have to take time away from your kids. Bring them in the room. So basically say like, hey, do you want to see what I'm doing? Let me teach you as a parent. Let me show you what I'm working on. Let me answer your questions if you're curious about why I'm building this thing this way or why I'm doing this thing this way. Maybe you want to give your kids the opportunity to try and build the thing themselves. Like let them kind of challenge themselves and figure it out. Or maybe it's as simple as just being in the same room together. So you're not just going in a room, kind of closing the door and ignoring your family. You're saying like, well, no, why don't I have my, if you have a son or daughter, why don't I have them come in the room with me? Maybe they'll have their own projects. So maybe they're like, I don't know, depending on their age, maybe they're like doing a coloring book or they're building Legos or doing something else, something creative, but they have work time with mom or dad and they get to spend time with you. So they get to kind of exercise their own creativity and, hopefully build a skill up around something. But at the same time, you get to be present with them, but you also get time to work on your stuff. And you make it something fun, like it's an actual activity that you spend time on every week. You say, cool, this is our like creative night and we're going to hang out and we're going to work on, like dad's going to work on his product or mom's going to work on her product and the kids are going to, work on, I don't know, a coloring book or something like that, like I said. But basically the point is invite people in. Don't shut people out. Just make it a space where it's like, no, this is something that we do. And again, putting an emphasis on the why. So it's like, mom or dad, why are we sitting in here while you stare and swear at a computer and I'm coloring? What are we doing? Like make it a point. It's like, well, and hopefully you're not swearing like that in front of your kids, but we are programmers, so this is the reality. But make the point back to them. It's like, well, I want you to see me working hard because that means something to a kid. Like when you see a parent or somebody like really try at something, like they remember that stuff. And so how cool would it be to not just accomplish what it is you want to do, so build a product, but they actually get to see it. So they have a memory of that. They remember like, oh, wow, that was really cool. I remember that time mom, like, she was super hardcore. And like for like 6 months, we just like every Tuesday night, like we went in the spare bedroom and we just like cranked on this idea. And like, well, I don't know if kids say cranked, but like we worked on stuff and it was really fun. And maybe it became like a thing that you just did as part of your family. Like they remember that. And it's something that you should really consider and invest some time into because that would be really special. And so keep that in mind. Ultimately though, no matter what of those options you choose, you have to accept and realize that the fact of the matter here, the truth is that you have to make a sacrifice in some form. You can't just do everything you're doing right now in the exact way that you're doing it and expect to get a different result or expect to get time to work on your idea. It's not going to happen. You have to make the time. You have to be deliberate and make the space for the thing that you want to do. If you don't, you're always going to be disappointed. You're always going to be frustrated. You're always going to be in this situation where you're like, oh, I never have enough time for anything, and I'm so angry, and blah, 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 blah. And the next thing you know, you're on the local news. And it's like, you don't want to be that person. So what you can do to avoid that, hopefully, is say, okay, I'm going to deliberately find some time to do this. I'm going to make the time, and I'm going to take a sacrifice and accept that if I want to go from where I'm at now to where I want to be, I have to sacrifice something, whether that be money in the form of my job, whether that be maybe spending time with friends on a certain night of the week, or maybe that's like getting up early. So you have to either go to bed early or you have to lose a little bit of sleep to get this done. But you're going to have to sacrifice something in order to find the time and make the time to work on the things that you want to work on. So I think that's going to do it. Hopefully that was helpful. Again, I want to make sure that what we're talking about here is actually moving you forward. Even if it's just like a little bit, I want to make sure that this is stuff that's actually useful and helpful to you. Because I know there's a lot of different things. So like I've talked about before, I spend a lot of time on the technical stuff, but I think things like this and this sort of topic are super important. So I want to make sure I give them time. But I also want to make sure that what I'm talking about is actually worth your time and you're not just like, this is stupid, I already knew that, what's wrong with you? Which if that's the case, go ahead and leave a comment down below. If you're watching this on YouTube or if you're listening on SoundCloud, go ahead and leave a comment. And yeah, if not either of those and you happen to use Twitter or something like that, send a tweet to at CLVRBGL on Twitter, and I'd be happy to hear you out. Be nice, because that usually makes me a little friendlier. If you're kind of mean, then I'm probably going to ignore you. But be nice, kind of make a suggestion about something you want to hear about, and I'd be happy to kind of share my thoughts if I have any on it. So yeah, that's going to do it for this week, folks. Thanks for listening, and we will see you for the next episode.